Oh, how you doing there, Blake?
Son, doing good. Trying to figure out this mess with your dang phone, man. Here, Brooke sending me another message. She is stressed. She said, I'm stressed about Chad's phone. When you get it working, please let me know.
Oh, well, I need to text her and tell her it's working. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm texting her now.
Son, she hit. Let her know.
Well, I just sent her a text out. I'm about to call her. Yeah, man, I just wanted to do a quick intro to this episode that you guys are about to listen to. This is with our brother Morgan Cook. Morgan was a funeral director for, what do you say, about 14 years, I think.
Yeah.
And it's a unique episode. We've never really recorded one with this depth, speaking on the topics of death and abortion. So it's not only abortion, but what to do with the remains of children who pass away during childbirth or whatever. So it's a heavy conversation. Morgan actually did a great job. I mean, he made it interesting. He made it to where we can listen to it without getting super emotional, right?
Yeah.
I thought he did an awesome job at that, man. But just wanted to let you guys know why we decided to have this conversation. We talk about here with Morgan the kind of the process of grieving a lost loved one, and we talk about why it's really kind of unhealthy to treat the reality of death as just this systematic thing that you just want to rush through. We talk about the value of human life. We talked to Morgan about how his career and being around death and the burial process and people that are grieving, how that's affected him and his emotions and also his spiritual life. And so, for me, this isn't a topic that I personally shy away from. I think these conversations are important for us to have.
Yeah.
And, that's why I wanted to reach out to Morgan and just get his testimony, man, and get him to share with us his lessons learned. And I thought it was great, and I thought it was valuable. I just wanted to give everybody a heads up that's going to listen to this episode. So
yeah, he's got an interesting take on it because he doesn't just do it for a job. It's clear that he has some deeper rooted thoughts behind this stuff, and it ended up taking up a career in it. And while he says it's not a ministry, I think it's just part of who he is now, and so he's able to give, like you said, he's able to provide value and information about it without invoking anger or sadness, and just where you can kind of hear the facts for what they are and look at it from a little different perspective without the emotions being welled up in you.
yeah, totally, man. I want to review these Xoskin shorts real quick before we jump off.
Yeah, they make some good ones. What are they, the compression shorts?
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time in these Xoskin compression shorts here. And okay, so this is the short. All right, I have been wearing these Xoskin compression shorts through the generations. All right, like the generations of technology as they've came up, as they've restructured them, as they, Xoskin, they're constantly improving the product. So the shorts in the beginning were a thicker short. They have now the newer ones. This one I have right here is this is the newest model. They're newer compression shorts. They have the thicker ones for the wintertime, and they also have the thinner ones. I prefer the thinner version, all right? And I also like the short version because I've told you guys the sexiest thing on my body is my legs. So if I'm going to show off one part while I'm out there running and I want to look good, it's going to be my legs. I want you guys to know I have a pair of these Xoskin compression shorts that are probably now 4 years old that I still wear and run and train in.
Yeah, the stuff lasts forever.
They're 4 years old. I don't have a single other pair of shorts I don't think I've ever had a pair of shorts that lasted 4 years.
Or anything that gets regular use. I mean, maybe a jacket.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I'm running miles and miles and miles in these things. The only thing that I've had 2 pairs. One pair got taken out by a barbed wire fence. Actually out at the Revenant.
yeah.
If you guys see all the pictures of me when I'm out running the Revenant, these are the shorts I got on. And I was crossing a barbed wire fence, and the crotch of my shorts got hung on the barbed wire and took them out.
And if you hadn't had those, it might have been your crotch that got hung.
They're still usable. But I can't wear them in public. I still wear them. It actually created a nice little vent.
It's like lingerie now.
Yeah, I actually wear them when I'm doing a private run. But if I'm doing a public run, those are out of the game. All right.
So basically, if something would take your skin off, it could potentially ruin the shorts, but may not. They might still make it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, they're still in use.
Yeah.
So like all Xoskin products, they are 100% made in the USA. They are 3D. This is 3D engineered fabric, guaranteed comfort, friction management, which is important. Nobody likes chafing. I especially don't like chafing. We have rapid wicking and drying. What's cool about Xoskin is it channels moisture away from your skin. That's what's so special about this fabric. That and the odor control. Those are the 2 like main reasons I prefer Xoskin over just normal running shorts or something like that. The salt and the moisture when you sweat, that's what causes you ultimately to experience chafing over a long period of time. So the fact that this moves the moisture away from the skin and to the outer edge of the garment where it falls away from your body, that's how it keeps you from chafing. I think that's a big part of it. Of course, Croy and Rick could tell you a lot more about how it works. And then the odor control, copper fabric. There's copper fibers woven into the fabric that literally you can wear these shorts for a week straight, and you can put them up to your nose, and it's not going to make you puke.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing how well they work in terms of odor management. So go check out Xoskin at xoskin.us.
And Croy told me the other day they're extending their sale, their holiday sale they had going through the end of January.
Okay, sweet. Well, you better get on it, man.
Yeah.
About halfway through the month now.
Yeah, got a few more days left.
Xoskin's been a part of the 307 podcast since the very beginning. They were our first sponsor. They were my first, I guess you could call them sponsor, as an athlete. They just sent me gear when I went out to run the Revenant the first time, shortly after I had got out of the Navy. So they've always been very generous. They make the best gear out there. And the fact that it's all made in the USA, I know means a lot to me.
Yeah.
So if you want a personal experience with a really high quality piece of gear, go with Xoskin. If you just want a big box store thing that's going to, you're going to buy it and use it for a couple months and then throw it away, you can go somewhere else. But
yeah,
thanks, Xoskin. We love you guys. All right. Hope you enjoy this conversation with Morgan. Here he is. All right, everybody. Welcome back to the 307 podcast. We've got a special guest on today, Brother Morgan Cook, the Texas Original Culture with a K. What's
yes,
up?
Sir.
What's up, brother?
It's going. Enjoying a nice day off work, and we're getting our shop. We've been trying to get Dream built for a while, and it's going down today.
Dude, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
I want to shop myself one day. I dream of having a shop where I can pull a vehicle in and change. Well, I'm just doing basic stuff. Oil changes, maybe rotating a tire every now and then. I want to have an archery range set up in there. I want to have a little quarters built back there in the back for Chili to live in. Just one room of quarters, and
like a 2x2 space.
Yeah, just enough for him to put a twin size bed in,
Yes, sir.
So, dude, I'm so interested in you, Morgan, and and also your wife, Kate, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you guys really post some awesome content. I'm just interested in you, what you guys do, and what your background is, because it's I love the content you guys put out. You're always out doing cool stuff. You guys wear some awesome outfits. I'm looking. You guys are Texas through and through, man. So
well, I was born and raised here, and my rule is you have to live here 10 years before you can call yourself a Texan. And she moved here in college from California. So I like to she's been here about 10 years, but her parents moved out, and I like to give them a good old hard time saying, you're not there just yet. Give it a few years.
I heard that, man. Well, Texas, you talk about Texas culture. I think Texas supplies the SEAL teams with at least a third of the bodies that are in the SEAL teams.
5 years ago, I read Marcus Luttrell's book, Lone Survivor. And, I read that's one of the most SEALs are coming from, out of California and Texas because of the environment.
Yeah.
Are so versatile. You got a little bit of everything from rugged terrain to the flats and desert areas and the ocean. And it's just like a paradise in my opinion.
I got to get down there and hang out with you guys sometimes. There's got to be something to it.
Oh yeah. Come on.
What's your background, Morgan?
So, out of high school, I wanted to go to auto mechanic school. My parents said, no, you don't want to do that. You don't make any living in that. You don't want to do that your entire life. And I was just one of those, like, kind of coasted through school. Didn't really challenge me enough, I guess. And I was filling out scholarship applications at the end of high school, and I kept bothering my mom, like, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what I want to do. And she said, just to kind of get me to be quiet so she can finish her programs and then help me. She said, why don't you look up being a funeral director? And I said, oh, okay. And I thought, they probably make decent money. They've got nice suits and decent cars. And so I looked into it, and it seemed interesting. And, here I am 13 years later, roughly, and went to mortuary school right out of high school and graduated, got my funeral director's and embalmer's license, and been doing that ever since, and just really grown in that field up until, right when the pandemic started. I was managing a large funeral home, and right when the pandemic started, I kind of left that, unfortunately, out of my own decision making, but kind of was a tough time for both me and Kate, and I kind of I knew our local grave digger, so I said, hey, you need help? I know you're always busy. And he said, yeah, come on. So for about a year and a half, I dug graves, and man, talk about hard work, but good work. Did that and kind of got into what I do now. Is I manage a cemetery for the city of Taylor, and a little bit easier going, a little bit more time off, but that's been my entire career. Is I've, been around death and dying pretty much since I was out of high school. So,
dude, I've always, I've been to some funerals in my day, and I've always wondered, just how that career choice or how that path in life, how that would have to take some emotional toll, on you in a negative way, but also how it could potentially impact you in a positive way. And, I just want to get a little insight from you. It's the first time I've ever been able to ask someone in your profession that question. I mean, what are the positive and negatives in terms of just, of that soul, that emotional part of you, that you've gotten from a career, like you just said, dealing with all aspects of death and seeing it firsthand. I mean, give me some insight on that, brother. That's interesting to me.
It used to irk me so bad when people, say, "Oh, what do you do?" I'm a funeral director. Like, "Oh, wow, that's a true, that's a mission and takes really special people. And I would say, no, anybody can do this. But as I gotten older and more experienced, and I don't believe it's necessarily a calling, but I do believe it takes certain skills and abilities to be able to serve someone at your best and they're at their worst, and be there for them, but yet be able to do it day in and day out without it bringing you down in your personal life. And I've never really had that many that really have gotten to me. We have had services for teenagers. Those have always been tough. Things like that. And then part of my career that I've kind of branched off into on the side is I'm part of our Funeral Directors Association disaster team. So anytime there's like a hurricane, we get called out to handle logistics of refrigeration trailers in the case of mass casualty events. And that was a really tough time, even though, we didn't thankfully deal with that much, but it's just the devastation and all that will kind of just weigh on you. And people say, well, how can you see things like that? Or, a drunk driver hit somebody and kill them and you got to go pick them up. And how can you still even believe in God with that? And I say, well, how can you not believe in God on the same hand? It all comes together, and it's one of those things. It's never really weighed on me and brought me down too bad, other than those occasional calls where it just every now and then weighs on you, like we're talking on the Resurrected with the sack of rocks on your back. Mm-hmm. You just got to, open that seam up and let them go, and because you can't be effective and serve the next person if you're letting that weigh on you.
Yeah, I'll Morgan, this is Blake, but we had a student at the Proving Ground this 2 weekends ago bring up how America has sheltered everybody from death, essentially. How you don't ever really see when someone dies. It's like you don't really ever see them again. And maybe short of an open casket or something like that. And how it's kind of uncomfortable or weird to be around that, but it's a natural part of life, and sheltering people from it really kind of puts you at a disadvantage. And I think when you do see death, it's real, it's there, and when you see it, it should open your eyes to that it is just a natural part of life, but also the tragic deaths, and open your eyes to evil, right? Just like you said, how could you not believe in God? Because if you believe in evil, you can't believe in one without the other. So that was interesting when she made that comment, and now to hear you further expound on it.
Yeah, and like it is in American culture has over the years, more in modern times, really sheltered people from death. And, it was all in good intention, but at the same time, it's also bad because you could lose touch with that reality. Mm-hmm. Back in the early 1900s, they'd have funerals at the house, have their loved one just, on the couch or on a wake table for viewing. Mm-hmm. And people would come all day and night and spend time with them and celebrate. And now it's, just hurry up and cremate me and don't make a fuss. Well, dying and funerals are not about the dead. They're about your family and celebrating your memory and being happy. And that's what I believe a true funeral director should be doing, is educating people that, we're here to celebrate the memory and how you remember them. But at the same time, you need that closure. You'll never fully process it and go through your grief without having that. And confronting that face to face really, scientists and studies have proven that having those viewings and things like that are really so helpful and beneficial, because you are faced with that reality and you can process it. As compared to, somebody passed and they just had immediate burial, no service, nobody. And next thing you know, it's just, well, where's John? We haven't seen him in a while. Like, oh, he passed away 3 weeks ago. And they're like, oh, that's unfortunate. And there may be somebody that may have had a close connection who's really struggling with that. And now all of a sudden they say goodbye because they just can't grasp the fact that he's gone, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I've always wondered what happened, like what caused that cultural shift from a family, you know, going through the intimate process and caring for a loved one after they passed away, and it being in the home, and maybe even having a family burial ground or cemetery. I mean, what do you think caused that cultural shift around how we treat it? Is it just simply like a population growth thing, or I mean, what are your theories on that, man? Because you're in the mix of this, and I've always wondered that, because I think I like the old way. I like the concept of the old way, and as far as I know, that's not even a legal option anymore.
Well, and when it comes to the funeral, every state has different rules and regulations. Texas is still kind of really loose on it. For example, you can have your own cemetery on your property. I mean, there's certain regulations you have to meet with how much land you have and things of that nature. But I mean, legally, you really don't even have to use a funeral home in the state of Texas. You can do your own services. You may run into issues trying to file death certificates nowadays with it's all done online, and you can't have access to the system unless you're a licensed professional, things like that. But as for having to have a funeral home do it, there's ways around. It's tough, but there's ways around it. But I don't know. I've never really been able to track down what happened, why it got to so. And I think part of it, like you said, is population boom and progressive way of thinking. Like I mentioned in that post a while back, you know, on our I was on that Supreme Court as a witness. Well, they asked kind of why they're like the cremation rate versus burial rate. And I said, well, you know, if you look at the East Coast and West Coast, they're more of a liberal, progressive population. So they try to say, you know, there's not that traditional ritual belief of having services. It's just a more progressive way of doing it. And you get to, you know, here in Texas or there in Georgia, and, you know, the more rural areas and the central states, it's people still believe in tradition and have that respect for, because I mean, if you've lived or been anywhere on a farm, you also deal with death every day. It may not be a human death, but, you know, just having to put down a cow or a sheep or goat, anything like that. I mean, that's death, and, you know, it's not a happy event. So the fact that I think all of us are still in one way or another, mostly in touch, we respect it that much more to have the rituals of a funeral and you know, having the traditional viewing. And I think how it kind of got into using funeral homes is, I think people when they started sheltering themselves from it, they didn't want to deal with that, because it is a lot to deal with.
Yeah.
And it someone along the line said, you know, I can do this. And it started out being, you know, furniture stores, because they made the caskets. Your local barber was also the mortician, you know, or the doctor. So it just kind of turned into one of those things where it kind of just morphed, and, you know, somebody was at the time an entrepreneur and said, hey, I'm good at this. I can do this and pay my bills rather than having to do all this stuff. And I enjoy it. And so therefore it caught on. And it's one of those industries that's, believe it or not, still kind of trapped back in the 19th century, 20th century, rather than moving on to the 21st, especially when I got into it. But it's improved a lot on those standpoints.
I think, you know, two things that would come to my mind would be, first, it's like a step toward the always comfortable. You know, like it's uncomfortable to be around death, and eventually somebody was like, man, we can get rid of this. We can be a little more comfortable in life. And that was just one of the early steps of that. And then you think too about a long time ago, the world wasn't as evil as it is now. And so how many more people would kill their family members if they could just bury them on their own property and not have any involvement of any outside, like even poison them or something, and they look fine and like, oh, well, they're dead.
That still happens. Then that happens. I mean, I had when I was still back living at home in East Texas, I had a call, sheriff's department called. It was about 2 a.m. He said, we've got a deceased person. I said, okay, well, what's the address? And he said, well, I don't think we need you to come. I was like, well, what do you mean? He said, the family's already out back digging a hole in their family cemetery. I said, well, if the judge who's like so in Texas, we don't have coroners. We have justice of the peace. They handle all that. And I said, if the judge is, declared there's no need for an investigation or anything, and, I defer to him and ask him if that's okay, but they just need to find a way to file a death certificate. And he said, okay, well, if we have any questions, we'll call. And I never heard it back from it. So I guess they buried that man that night.
Man,
dude, that's Texas culture right there. I'm telling you, man.
It is. And I got some guys I'm friends with that are old guys, and they've been in this area forever. And he used to be the grave digger back a long time ago. Man, the stories he has from back then, you're just unbelievable.
Dude, I can only imagine. Yeah, because I bet 50, 60 years ago in rural Texas, it was was old school, man. A lot has changed. A lot has changed about everything in culture. And, it's interesting to me the way you talked about the progressive kind of view on death, and where I've seen that in really advanced stages is in New Zealand. I saw that progressive treatment of death in way down along the line to the point that we have a friend over there that had a brain injury. We might have him on the podcast one day, but essentially he was open with the fact that if he didn't recover at the level he wanted to recover at within the next 10 years, he was just going to kill himself. And everyone around him was okay with that. They were like, yeah, well, that makes sense to me.
And that's such a, that's hard, because I've seen some of these, seen these people under hospice and care, and you can tell, hospice gives you comfort, but those people are suffering. So you kind of, it's a hard, I have my faith in what it says, but it's hard not to, because you care about people. So it's hard to see that and say, well, no, they have to suffer and live out their days because that's what we believe. And, you shouldn't suicide, but it hurts so much to see people suffer,
Yeah, but it's you're cheating the natural process. And, it's easy to sit and talk about that natural process when we're here healthy and young and vibrant. I'm sure it will be for me, it's like the ultimate finish line. It's like the ultimate challenge is maintaining, who you want to be remembered as throughout that final process. And, I watched my grandfather do that not long ago. I remember we spent the day with my grandfather the day before he died, and he just was cutting up and smiling and being himself, and he maintained his integrity and his honor and who he was to the very end. And that is part of the process, I have to believe, of experiencing the fullness of life. And I think that's what scares me so much about these suicide pods and these euthanization centers and stuff. I don't know if scared me the right word, or maybe it frustrates me that would be an option to just kind of it's quitting essentially and cheating the process of life.
To think back to y'all's podcast a while back about being mentally tough, to me, that's even in those stages of life, you're giving up. You're not being tough and, you know, seeing it through to the end. You know, God gave us our amount of time to live, and, you know, I'm not a big predestination person or anything like that. I think there's some aspects to it, but, you know, if you're cutting that short, you're taking God's power over you away and putting it on your terms, which that's not our, you know, we don't live here on our terms. We're on God's terms.
Wow.
And you, even in, you know, you could be about to, you know, die naturally from your illness or old age, whatever it may be. You could pass away tonight, but if you say, no, I'm going now on my terms, that's not right, because so your grandkid could come in that evening to say goodbye to you, and you may change their life for the better for the rest of their lives. And by cutting that short, you're, you know, you're robbing them of that.
Man, that's solid, man. And I think it is to treat the whole process of death, and to skip over to be so systematic about it, to skip over the mourning process and the just the almost, I mean, there's a community aspect to it also, where people that you know, people come together and support one another, and just to skip over that whole process and just be systematic with it, I think is extremely unhealthy. And I saw that too in the SEAL teams, man, because that's the way a lot of times guys and platoons and teams had to operate. If they lost someone, there just simply was not the time or the capacity to properly mourn and work through that loss, man. And it creates a very unhealthy soul, essentially, emotional
it's
aspect.
anger.
Yeah, exactly, man. And I think that's very dangerous, man. And I think that's the culture is heading that direction very fast, of just treating that as a systematic thing.
And like so the stages of grief, you know, set up by Kubler-Ross are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And I can remember that because we were always taught DABDA, DABDA. And everybody handles those things differently. And you can apply that to the loss of, you know, like we were on vacation a few months back in Yosemite, and on the way back, our diesel truck's engine locked up. We went through stages of grief with that. So, I mean, it doesn't apply to just death. I mean, anything, you have to go through those stages of grief when you lose them. And everybody goes through them different and in maybe a little bit different order, but it always falls back to those things. And if you can identify those things along with being faithful, you can get through it, but you have to go through that process. You can't skip it, or then you can have what's called complicated grief. Now, I'm not psychiatrist or anything like that. We studied those things, but you fall into that complicated grief that gets buried, and you may wonder why, like, you just can't handle things. And that may be why funerals have transitioned to less of a ceremonial thing, is because people over time stop doing it and processing that because someone told them, you know, to ignore it. And next thing you know, here we are. And if you, like you said, apply that to society as a whole, and we're not properly processing these things, it's a dangerous path.
Yeah.
It's leading to nowhere.
Yeah. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you, Morgan, you don't have to be a psychiatrist to speak your mind on this show, because we're talking to a man that has lived and seen and been with people working this process day in and day out for over a freaking decade. And that's what's important to me, man. It's why I'm so interested in your perspective on it. And I had to ask you too, obviously, you are a servant of Christ, and I have to just hear why do you serve Jesus? When did you submit your life to Christ, and just a little bit about your testimony, man.
I always grew up. When we were little, we'd spend the weekend at my grandparents. We lived out in the country, and my grandparents lived in town, and we'd spend the weekend with them, and they always took us to church, and Church of Christ every Sunday. And growing up, you hit those in there, I mean, you go to Bible school, and my grandparents had a rock solid foundation, and even though my parents, they didn't go to church every weekend, they still had that good solid foundation of Christian values and beliefs, and along with proper parenting, of course, you grow up, and I went through those teen years where you go like, I don't want to go to church and all that, and then as I've gotten older, you start to appreciate that, and it's kind of a journey I went on I found on my own, because I've always, when I moved from East Texas, I moved 4 hours away to Central Texas, and I'm always been quote unquote on my own, which I know, like we were talking about last night, share the cross and bear your burdens, or carry your cross and share your burdens. Well, it's just one of those things I wasn't able to do that. And so I was forced, go out and meet people on my own. It got to be some dark times, when you move across a state like that, and, you just kind of keep doing the same thing. And had some, dark times that I've only really talked about this with my wife and our pastor that married us. But there was one night, I probably wasn't going to make it that night, but for some reason, something just snapped and said, no, that's stupid. That's selfish. Don't do that. And it'll get better. It always does. Everything always gets better. And you can't enjoy the sunny days without the rainy days, basically. As corny as all that sounds.
No, it's the truth, man.
You got to have those rainy days. And, so from that point on, and I knew it was God talking to me. I've never lost my faith. And I guess you could say I did, but, I didn't think it was some other being or just me making that decision. It was God making that decision. And from then on, it kind of just put a new light on looking at things. And then not only that, I think it helped me in my personal life, helped me in my career, of course, dealing with like what we were talking about with, death and dying. And from then on, it's just changed. Like you guys might almost just too, it frustrates my wife. I'd say she gets so upset. I'm like, it's going to be all right. She's like, don't say it's going to be all right. I'm like, no. She's like, how can you say that? It's because, God wouldn't put us through things if we couldn't handle it. Yep. And that's my faith that it's going to be all right.
Yeah. As long as you don't quit. I completely subscribe to that. That's that undulation, that constant undulation that we experience as humans, as because we're subject to time. You can't lose perspective on the reality of that undulation of life that we all go through, man.
Oh yeah, and like we're talking about Resurrected, with planning and letting and trusting God with the steps in between. I'm a huge proponent of that. Like, I'm not as good as the planning in general, but I whatever happens, and I have faith it's for the best, almost to a fault. But you can't go. I don't see how people go through life without having a faith in a superior power that's going to handle us and take care of us and provide for us. And that's not saying you don't have to do things. I mean, God blesses you, yes, but He also blesses you with two hands to get work done.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of people that don't have that as part of. Again, they don't have that spiritual aspect, or they choose to ignore it, or try not to understand it, and they don't freaking make it through life. They don't make it, and that's probably that number's in the millions, I'm sure. And I think that's a part of our faith that we probably take for granted sometimes, of like this spiritual aspect of us is what is literally sustaining our ability to make it from start to finish through this thing that we call life. That is hard. I don't freaking give a crap who you are.
Well, and that's our life on this planet. Our life keeps going after that, and in our belief and Christian belief. And, when I was kind of looking over things to, getting ready for this, there was a verse that popped out, and that's 1 Thessalonians 4:13, and it's brothers and sisters, we do not want you to be uninformed about those who sleep in death, so that you do not grieve like the rest of mankind. You have no hope, or who have no hope. For we believe that Jesus died and rose again, so we believe that God will bring with Jesus those who have fallen asleep in Him. And that's it right there. I mean, it's going to be okay.
That's it, man.
And God created us all the same to live life, and then when we pass away, if you were a good Christian, and you go to heaven, and life goes on, but it's even better. Yep. So if this is the worst it can get compared to that, it's going to be all right. We'll keep going.
It's a great perspective, man. That's a great perspective.
And it's just with death, I've seen some, elderly people who've been strong in their faith their entire life, and then they lose their spouse who they've been with, 50 plus years. And that's the hardest in my career. One of the hardest things to handle is seeing a 80-year-old man who lost his wife and now he's got no one break down. That's tough, because you always see your grandparents, the grandfathers, as strong, hard old men that you don't dare shed a tear in front of, because they'll let you know it. And but to see the elderly man almost lose their faith, and then it strengthens their faith, it's just there's no words for that.
Wow. No, there's definitely not. And to see that as many times as you've seen it, gosh, that puts things into perspective, man.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I've made a lot of quite a decent network of things doing this career, because it is a servitude type career. Like I've served people all the time, and everything aspect. I mean, even so in the funeral home, you always hear about funeral directors being, part of the city council, things like that. I got nominated as president of our local chamber when I was at the funeral home and ran that. And there's just things like that. You're there for other people. You can't be a funeral director and serve yourself. I've made that mistake, trying to I'll do this, we'll get more business and we'll grow the funeral home. But you can't do that. You just have to be there for them and do a good job and provide your services to the best of your ability, and then everything falls in place, like anything.
Yeah, anything, and especially in a ministry, I think is a very similar format there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's what I was trying to think of earlier. People would say, "Well, that's really a ministry," and I still a little disagree with that, because I don't consider myself, and maybe that's because I define things too black and white when it comes to that. But I don't define myself as a preacher, or yes, we all minister to people in our daily lives, but it's service above self.
Yeah.
Basically. And so I don't see it as a ministry per se. I know some people can consider it. I personally don't. And that's just me.
I think that's a key aspect of ministry. I think I've never heard it put that way, service before self, but I think that is a key aspect of at least one major component that defines what your ministry is, or what you're called to do in your life, right? And if it fits that mold, service before self, then I think you're bumping right there up against what your calling is, or what your ministry is in life, man. So I love that.
And it doesn't make death any easier for me. We're expecting our first child coming up. We just found out we're having a little boy. So we're so happy for that. Awesome. But my wife said, well, if things go bad, during the process of labor and everything, you may have to make a choice. Who do you want to live? And I said, well, I don't know. And I don't have an answer to that, because that's not a comfortable decision I'm ready to make.
Yeah.
And now I have to, and I'm still, I'm still praying about that and praying for an answer. But I really don't think there should be an option. I think the doctor should do what they best for both everybody involved. But she doesn't want that answer. She wants a real answer,
dude.
since she said. And I said, well, it's a tough one to come across. And even though everything I've done over my career in regards to that realm, with infants and all that, it doesn't make that. I'm not any more educated than the next person to make that decision.
Yeah, you might just need to say, "Hey, Kate, that's situational dependent. That's situation dependent."
Yeah.
That's a
we'll
tough one,
see.
man. I gotta, man, and I got to get into that aspect of kind of, the message you sent me. I had made a post a while back, referencing death, because it is something that I'm also aware of in my existence, and I think about quite often, not in a negative way, but I definitely don't lose connection with the reality of death in my everyday life. And I think the post was, I don't even remember what it said, but it was confusing people. And I actually took the post down, and you messaged me, and you were like, "Hey man, where did that post go?" And I explained to you, I think I went a little too deep for a little text on Instagram. We might need to do a podcast on that, just so I don't confuse people. And you had, along with that message, you had sent me, telling me about when you were a funeral director, you had testified in the Supreme Court as an extreme witness when clinics sued the state of Texas because there was a law that said all fetal remains must be buried or cremated. And I just want you to talk me through the deeper context of what you testified about, and just explain that more in depth to me, because there's something there, and it's something that you also said you hold close to your heart and you're passionate about. So,
the funeral home I last worked at, we had a program that one of the prior funeral directors had there. He had since passed away, but that he had set up for one of the local hospitals is in these hospitals that were, religious based, they would give the families the option of, do they want to, in the case of miscarriages, for example, they would give the families options. So do you want to contact a funeral home to have a burial or cremation done, and, a service or anything like that? Or if not, the hospital would take care of it. They would do a mass burial at a local cemetery. Well, our funeral home handled that. But also at the same time, these families were referred to us because one of the elderly gentlemen that worked for us, helping us part-time on services, he made these small wood infant caskets. And so in combination with the cemetery, we had this program, and it kind of had grown, and we were known as if you've had a miscarriage or your baby passed away, to go to us, we'll take good care of them. We did all of it at no charge. If they did buy any type of merchandise, we did it at cost, but as for our services, we didn't charge, which most, if not all, funeral homes do for the little ones. But anyway, we had done that for so long. I built partnerships with three of the other major hospitals in the area to handle all of them. And we do it, once every quarter. And I mean, there was probably, from one of the hospitals alone, of course, it was a major hospital it's a major hospital in the region, but I mean, we're talking a couple hundred every quarter. And these are infants that range from, weeks to maybe 1 month or 2 months, and it was just families that weren't ready to process that. And so the hospitals took care of it, and the families were aware. They told them of their program, that they were buried at X cemetery on this date, and they were actually invited to attend this service. So it wasn't like it was just done behind the scenes.
Yeah.
The families were aware, but we had taken on as well. If the families wanted to, we would do it. And the state, so they tried to pass a law saying that all fetal remains must be cremated or buried to provide for proper burial. Yes, there was probably some political intent to minimize abortions because it applied to the abortion clinics and all of them.
Yep.
And, you know, so because other than that, they were just taken out with medical waste and incinerated. So the state tried passing this law. Well, a lot of these clinics grouped together and sued the state to prevent this law. And in the meantime, the state had set up a registry for funeral homes who provide services like ours to register so they can have these resources for these clinics.
Now, are these abortion clinics specifically that you're talking about, or are you talking about medical
mostly,
facilities?
Yeah. It's kind of hard to say. It's mostly the clinics. I don't want to say the names because I don't want it. I mean, it's been since 2017, so I don't know if there's like, I mean, it's all public information. So
yeah.
It was this whole women's health group.
Okay.
So they represented these, and they preferred it during the trial. They preferred to be called facilities, which in my mind was a joke. But you know, if a duck's a duck, let's call it a duck. Yeah. But you can't do that nowadays anyway.
Yeah.
So
let's just change the language and imagine it's something else. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so I signed up for this registry, and then I didn't hear anything about it. And a couple weeks later, I get a phone call from the Attorney General's office saying, asking about our program. And they said, "Would you mind being deposed?" Or they said, well, first they said, "You're going to be subpoenaed for all your information." And I said, "Oh, okay." They explained why. And I said, all right. So they sent us over the subpoena and had all, they wanted all these records and documents. And I said, we can't comply with this. It's too cumbersome. And so we got them to work with us, and I gave them what little information they got, and then they said, well, you're going to be deposed and you're going to get subpoenaed for deposition, as an expert witness. And I said, okay. And it was for both sides. They, not just the state wanted me as a witness, but the other side did too, which was different. So I sat through a 4-hour deposition, and was questioned by not only the state, but these attorneys from New York that represented these clinics. And you could just tell that, they were taking this as they had no respect that these were human lives. They were saying, this is basically just, medical waste.
Yep.
And so, there's a little bit different there, because I've held a 2-week-old fetus in my hands, and it's not medical waste. Of course, you can't just say that.
Yeah.
But at the end of that, it was all over, and I had an attorney kind of represent me through those, just in case, like sometimes they say those depositions get really ugly. And she was provided through a nonprofit group that represents like churches, things like that. And she warned me. She said, you need to go on your social media. You don't have to, cancel your accounts, but you make everything private as you can, because they're going to come at you, these people, because they're crazy. Thankfully, I didn't really have that issue. But so I got a call about 3 or 4 months later from the state again, and they said, she said, would you mind testifying? And I was like, well, she goes, well, and to be honest, you really don't have a choice, because they're going to subpoena you. And I was like, well, then why are you asking? And so they subpoenaed me, and then they set the date, and I took the day off work, and my wife went with me down there. Of course, I couldn't go into the courtroom until they called me, because they don't want you hearing what the other people have to say. And the cemetery we did all these burials of these infants at, they were subpoenaed as well. So I got the guy that runs that, I'm friends with, and he was there. But they called him in first, and I sat there for 3 or 4 hours, and then they called me, and I went in, and my wife had already gone in and listened to Jimmy, the guy who does the cemetery. And she said, when I walked in, she said, all them people just kind of were like, and I said, why? And I figured this out later. They wanted me because I'm young, and they expected some old man that's probably out of touch with what's going on. But they chose me because I was young. I know what's going on in the world. I know what this is all about. And
yeah.
So it kind of took them all back. And I got up there, and I was on the stand for about 3 to 4 hours. And it was nerve-wracking. They kept trying to trip me up and get my own religious and political beliefs involved. And the judge, he stood up and he yelled at those attorneys and said, "You can't do that. What this little guy over here from Central Texas thinks does not matter in this case. We've already been over this." And they pick apart your emails, your your signature, and it was a lot. And I feel like I did my best because I've always taken the care of these infants very personally. I mean, one of the things I'll never forget is taking a stillborn baby from its mother's arms and having to take it away from her to go back to the funeral home. That's not a great memory to have. So I took those battles with that very personally, and it was very hard not to get emotional about it and still be professional on that stand when I'm being told that, I'm just putting them in an oven to incinerate them. I was like, no, that's not the case. These parents are grieving, and they tried to say, well, y'all just serve Christians. I said, I don't care who you are. If you walk through my door wanting a funeral, you could be Osama bin Laden himself, but it's my duty to provide you the services you require. Now, that's probably an extreme example. I wouldn't give him services, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And they, because the name of the funeral home it's actually named after the rivers that ran through the city, but it has it's a biblical name. So they tried to say like, oh, well, because you're Christians and all that, they're trying to keep women from having abortions because you don't agree with that. And I said, ma'am, when people walk in my door, I don't know how these babies have passed away.
Mm-hmm.
They're not saying, well, I aborted my baby or things like that. And it doesn't matter to me. And it was a long ordeal. It was a great learning experience, and it's something I'll never forget. And I feel like I did my best to serve and represent not just the funeral directors, but I represented Christianity on the terms of serving and when it comes to abortion and things like that. And it was very frustrating because the court ruled that in favor of the clinics that the law was unjust and it violated constitutional rights of a woman. And it was very frustrating because these clinics tried to say like they couldn't handle, having to pay for and taking care of all these remains, but none of them, and then they even made this a factual in the trial, none of them had ever reached out to any funeral home or any facility to say, hey, can you handle this for us?
You guys were doing it for free.
Yeah, we were already doing it for free.
Yeah.
And it was ridiculous because they were like, well, we don't have anybody that can do it for us. And on the other hand, we're like, no one's ever called us and asked, but yet they still ruled in favor of them. And the judge, I kind of see where he was saying, basically the law needed more clarification on things and like how the logistics of this whole thing would work. But then the last I knew, the states appealed it, and it'd go up to the next level. But that's been, like I said, since 2017. So, and it just became a real close issue to me. Anytime we had a baby come in, I always tried to take those on myself. So,
I'll tell you what, brother.
Yeah.
That's some heavy dang stuff right there, son.
Mm-hmm.
That is some heavy stuff. And you're essentially in this courtroom and you are doing all that you can to advocate for these unborn children or these stillborn children and advocate for the value of respecting their remains.
It's the value of life.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what this whole thing in my mind, that's really what it boils down to is the degradation of the value of human life. And this is what's so astounding to me on this level. We're talking about the foundational level here, a completely innocent human life. And there's a whole nother conversation about when does human life start. The most logical biological answer in my mind is cut and dry. It's when a sperm meets an egg, and this then becomes a life form, its own life form. Like, that's biologically. How can you dispute that?
And I went back. I shouldn't have, but last night I went back on that post you had made talking about it, and that I had shared, and I made the mistake of going and reading those dang comments. And, it's just so many evil people that can come out of the woodworks. And, like, how can you even think that? And I mean, NASA finds traces of microorganisms and microbacteria on the moon, and they call it life. But yet the two cells that have formed and are splitting into 4, then the 8, then the 16, and in my wife's body right now were not considered life when that happened. And it's frustrating because us as men have been beat down that we have no say in that conversation, but yes, we do. We made that with them. It wasn't just the woman.
Yeah.
My DNA is just as much of a part of it as hers. And even though, yes, you're carrying the burden of carrying that baby and going through the pains and the errors, but it's just as much our responsibility as it is theirs.
Yeah.
And it may not be as physically, but we're going through it just as much. And the fact that they'll sit there and say, well, if you don't have a uterus, you have no say in this conversation. No, I do have a say, and I will say. And it's a human life that we create.
Yeah. How does your gender play into your ability to advocate for a human life? It's nonsensical. It's pure. It's evil in its purest form, and it is such a foundational issue, because here's the thing with us devaluing the life of an unborn child. Well, if a society or a culture or a nation chooses to do that, devalue the most innocent form of human life, and devalue it to the point that you're just treating that the remains of that life. Well, first of all, in some cases, you're intentionally murdering or intentionally ending that life, and then treating the remains as medical waste. If you decide to do that, that is the ultimate devaluation of human life. Yeah. And so what happens, what stems from that is what we see in our nation right now. These just murder rates off the charts, these heinous crimes, sex trafficking. This is, I want everybody to understand that the increased rate of murder and violent crime and all these things, it's going off the freaking charts, man. And it's all really, it is all influenced by this most fundamental valuation of human life that we've chosen as a nation to say, we can just. It's unbelievable to me when you actually describe what it is. You can rip a unborn child from a mother's body, take that life, and then throw it in the garbage can, or use it or use the remains to. There's no telling what they whisk those remains off to utilize, but it's just it's unbelievable.
And they try to say, my body, my choice. Well, what about the baby's body?
Exactly.
What about his choice?
It's an illegitimate argument. And so man, I cannot imagine how heavy that had to be, you being up on the stand and having to defend that topic against, and these people, man, these clinics and these women's groups, these people are some of the most vicious people on earth. Yeah. I mean, they are absolutely ruthless.
Yeah, they're even above the whole political scene.
They are ruthless, man.
And, thankfully, a lot of that trial, like what I said, there were some reporters there, writing stuff down and tweeting things as they went along. And, thankfully they didn't pick up on because they got me to trip up once when they wanted me to explain the cremation process. And they kept pushing me to describe what the machine actually is. And I ran out of words and got frustrated. I got weak. And I said, it's essentially a large oven incinerator, and then they're processed it wasn't the machine, it was the processing machine they wanted described, which is essentially a machine that has two blades in it that spins, and it processes down the cremains into what you see as ashes. Mm-hmm. Because the cremains aren't ashes, they're bone fragments. Mm-hmm. And if there is ash, it's what the container of the body was in at the time. But they kept wanting to explain that. And I finally said the only way I could explain it in layman's term, because they kept pushing for it, was essentially a large blender. And they took that and they ran with it, trying to say that, well, that's no better than going to a medical waste facility. We're just throwing them in an oven and a blender and grinding them down. And it was like, no, it's way different than that. But that was one of my weak moments on that day. But yeah, they were vicious when they decided to latch onto that. And thankfully no reporters did, or, you'd probably send me on the front of CNN that I was the devil or something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the process, describing the process of it is sounds brutal either way it goes, but I think the key part is the respect. Mm-hmm. Is the respect aspect of it, right? And actually showing through that the respect for those remains, showing that, okay, this was a valuable human life, and we're going to respect that and maintain that respect throughout this entire process.
Just like hunting, you want to take a shot that's not going to allow that animal to suffer because you respect that life.
Yep.
And if you don't even respect wildlife, how can you respect human life?
Well, it's crazy.
People think
it's crazy that a lot of these organizations have actually elevated animal life above human life in a lot of ways. Even a lot of our, good gosh, man, a lot of our laws that we have in the United States of America would put an animal's life above a human's life. You go out here and shoot a freaking bald eagle, they're gonna put you under the jail, son, and you ain't ever getting out. All right.
Yeah.
And
meanwhile, you can go and you had a one night stand or something like that, and all of a sudden it's inconvenient. You can go take a human life, and that's okay. Pat you on the back.
Exactly.
They don't even make you feel shameful of it anymore. Just with culture, the way is like, I saw someone shared something today. It said, things you should be shameful for, and abortion was listed on there, along with other things that you should be ashamed of that. Now, should I shame you for that? No, but because I love you as a Christian, but you should internally feel bad and regret that decision. Yeah. Because that's how you can't call yourself a Christian and keep doing the same sin. You should be trying to not do that sin.
Yeah. Yeah. It's conviction. Yeah. It's conviction. I mean, that's part of conviction is actually evidence that your spirit, the spiritual part of you, is still intact. Yeah. Conviction as a human, if you feel convicted because of something that you did, is actually a wonderful thing. Yeah. Right? Because as long as you're feeling conviction about something, that means that you have not been turned over to what the Bible calls as a reprobate mind. And I think that is why these people are some of the most vicious people on earth, is because they have completely been turned over by God, been turned over to a reprobate mind. They have asked for it. They have pursued it. They have taken it to that point that in terms of Scripture, it literally, the Scripture tells us, you want to take it to that point? You take it to that point, you take it that far, and God will turn you over to this, and there is no coming back from it. Because once you're turned over to a reprobate mind, you cannot come back to Christ without feeling some conviction about sin in your life, whatever it is. It's impossible to get back to Him. It's impossible.
Yeah.
And man, I'll tell you, gosh, this is deep stuff, man.
When last night when I was looking over things, get ready for this call, I went on my Bible app, and they have the verse of the day, and it's so crazy how sometimes it's just God works through that, and the right verse for whatever is going on. The verse was Job 31:15. Did not He who made me in the womb make them? Did not the same one form us both within our mothers? You're taking away the same thing that you were, that made you, and you're choosing to end that. I mean, that's essentially, that can equate back to the suicide conversation.
Yep.
That, yeah, it's one of those battles, and if it's going to be one of these long, hard fought battles, that's going to take us as a society a long time to battle, because it's gotten so ingrained in our culture.
Yeah. Well, and that was going to be my last question for you, Morgan, is because you have, this has been such an intimate part of your life, and I would almost say it is the purpose you have been called to serve in your life, the body of Christ, and I mean, what is the, I don't know if you could say the best, or like, what can we as people do to support you, or to I guess combat this atrocity in our day-to-day life? I mean, what have you seen works, or how do we reach people that are still opening to listening? I mean, you got any advice for us, man?
It's hard. I mean, I haven't worked in the funeral home in about 2 or 3 years, 2 years. And one of the things I've seen, and it's an unfortunate way to go about things, but people I've known that have lost their children who had, more of a belief that, it's okay, but then they lose their own children, unfortunately, unexpectedly, and it changes their opinion on all that. It changes their spirituality. It has to.
Yeah.
And that's been one of the key things I see really change people's perspective. And, unfortunately, it does involve a loss of life, but like anything, without great loss, there's no great improvement. And I'm not saying we should lose our babies to make us realize this, but it's, you show these people the best way you can being a Christian. And, I don't condemn people who have an abortion. I wasn't there when they made that decision, but I know it probably wasn't an easy one. And if it was, that's even worse. But they should be, just be a good Christian to them. Don't judge them, love them.
Yeah.
And the best way I can think back is when you referenced the shoe company. Jesus ate with the tax collectors and the sinners.
Yeah.
He broke bread with them. Break bread with them and show them that, it's going to be okay. You can get through this. Very,
wow, man.
You keep this life is a new beginning, and you can do it, and you'll be great. Life won't be easy. We have to live with the consequences of our decisions, but be there for them, love them. the best thing we can do, right?
Yes, and yes, man. That is the best advice ever. And it's so, I think, difficult, or it feels so unnatural when we're dealing with such a deep, heavy, emotionally charged topic, and you see people that are on our side, you see them getting really fiery and really attacking these individuals who have made this decision. And that literally leads to nothing.
Yeah.
The best, you put it down, the best possible thing we can do if we encounter individuals in our lives who have made this decision. You still there, brother?
Yeah, my mic or my
no worries.
Things are there. You are. Okay.
I got you. The best thing that we can do, and what not only the best thing that we can do, but what we are called to do, is to spend time in love those people, and eventually pointing them to the fact that no matter what the decision is that they made, an atonement has been made for their mistakes. And just like you said, we have to live with the consequences of our decision and the feelings that we have afterwards. And man, I have to do that on a day-to-day basis myself.
Oh, yeah.
All of us have to do that. But the fact that we, no matter what mistakes we make, no matter what poor decisions that we make, even a decision as significant as ending a human life, we can still be reconciled through Christ to our Creator and spend eternity serving Him. What a beautiful answer, man.
I can't sit there and believe that people can say like they believe in God and then will willingly make that decision. Yes, there are the strange circumstances when there is health issues involved, but that's a very small percentage. But you can't tell me that these people who go out and willingly do this and think it's okay truly believe in God. Because it'd be like saying, like, yeah, I'm addicted to drugs, but I have forgiveness, but I'm going to still go do them tonight. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
You have to really know that because it's frustrating because I get fired up and I can't get my words out, but you just know God and it's the answer. It's simple, and it's so simple you can't explain it. Because once you know God, you have that appreciation for life. You know that everything's going to be okay. You're going to love the people next to you and care for them no matter their decisions. And hopefully that leads them to being the same way. And then therefore, that small change is you're changing the world. And I think that's, our mission from God for everybody. It comes down to that basic thing, it's spreading the word so that, this world would be a better place.
Yep. 100%, brother.
Yeah. I would say that you said it well, Morgan, in that the way that we treat this is no different than the way we treat anything else, because this boils down to being a heart issue, just like every other sin or wrongdoing out there. It's because it's a heart issue. So the question becomes, what can you do to change these people's hearts, not their minds? It's obvious that it's illogical, and logic doesn't work when supernatural things are going on. When things you say, that makes sense, but I'm still feel like doing this, then that tells you, well, okay, logic is not going to work. What can I do to change their heart? And all you can do is love them, like you said, and pray that they see that through you and are able to recognize their own wrongdoings in their own mind, because you're not going to explain it to them why it's wrong or win the battle. And almost attacking that person that did it, you might could argue it, but I would almost argue that by doing that, it's worse than really doing nothing, because all you're doing is like throwing another stick on the fire. in a way. But,
Yeah, you're pushing them further away.
Yeah.
That's solid, brother.
Yeah.
Well, Morgan,
Man.
I can't thank you enough, man, for coming on here and discussing not only this topic but the conversation that we had beforehand, just in terms of of death, because I think it's a great reminder, and it's a great thing for our perspective in life. It's a great thing to consider, and man, it's just was powerful to have you on here, man. I can't thank you enough, brother.
I was so happy to join in, and whatever you've ever talked about it, I had that urge, from God telling me, like, you can contribute to this conversation so much and further it, because I have the experience in it. And I don't like tooting my own horn, but I've been doing, that's all I've known my adult life.
Yeah.
And like, and it was funny because y'all had the podcast where you said stand up, and if you have something to say, stand up. Which right now I'm pacing around the house because I can't sit still while I'm on the phone. But
yeah,
I told Kate, I was like, what if we just went down to Georgia? I know they'd be welcome to have us, and did it in person. And unfortunately, some things came up, and then we weren't able to make that happen. But and then I got COVID, or a cold, whatever you want to call it, a couple weeks ago or last week, and I'm better than that now. But yeah, I was completely honored to be here and have this conversation with you.
Well, I have faith we'll get to meet you in person sometime soon, brother. You're a big part of 3 of 7 Project, and we're following you guys. And will you tell the listeners where they can find you and follow you, and also Kate, because you guys post really great, positive, good pictures, good content. You're a good follow on IG. So.
Oh, thanks. You see some of the stuff out there, and you're like, this is the same old fake, not real stuff. So it's just our lives, and that's the way we live. And but you can find Kate over at she's an artist, and so you can find her on her business page, Asphalt Canvas Art. Her account got deleted mysteriously right at 10,000 followers, so we've been battling that. Mine you can find over at Texas Original Culture on Instagram, and that's Culture with a K. Kind of converting my personal page to my side business page, but that's all new. But you'll find us there. So,
all right, guys.
Yeah.
Well, Morgan, thank you, brother. We'll talk soon.
And I was actually going to put in an application for a basic course, and then we found out we were pregnant, and I was like, I'm not going to have time for that right now. So in the future, it's on my list.
I was going to ask you later on. Yeah, we're waiting to see that come across, man.
Yeah. So, but no, it's on my radar.
We'll be here, Lord willing, when you're ready, brother. Yep.
Oh, yes, sir.
Thanks a lot, Morgan.
Thank you. God bless y'all.
You too, brother.
Thanks. Bye.